This month's training is to give an overview of preschool and special ed programs. And I do thank all of my panelists for joining me. I have worked with many of them and they are just some exemplary people. That's why I go out and look for them. I'd like to, either who would ever like to start off in your particular area. We have Deirdre, who is early intervention for Albany County. Dr. Marmet, who is retired. You're retired like I am. Who is retired CPSE and CSE chair from the South Colony School District. We have Tanya, who is a psychologist par excellence from Spotted Zebra. And we also have Sherry Canfield, the executive director of Spotted Zebra. And we have our parent. Last couple of years ago when we did this, one of the things we noted, we did not have a parent to speak from the parent's perspective. So I went out and found a parent. And so we welcome Tracy to this panel. And whoever would like to start, you may. And we'll hold questions to the end. They'll be in the chat. So who would like to begin?
Tony, I can begin because it's early intervention. So I guess that's where the whole journey starts.
Yes.
For, families. So I think that most of the people here are very familiar with early intervention, could probably tell me things about early intervention that I don't know. So do you want me to give an overview of the program or what
overview of early intervention and the criteria for entering into EI? How does that come about?
Okay, sure, I can do that. So the early intervention program is part of a federal program. Okay, it was created in 1986 as part of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, Part C. Okay, in New York State, it's part of Title 2A of Public Health Law, which established the New York State Early Intervention Program here. So I've been working for the early intervention program here in Albany County since 1997. So I've been here almost from the start. It's been a long time. And it's been a wonderful experience, met many, many wonderful people, parents, providers. It's been an incredible experience. So the early intervention program is for children that are newborn to 36 months old. So we look at the 5 areas of development. Okay, so we're looking at children's physical skills, social emotional skills, cognitive skills, self-help skills, and communication skills. So the first step is to establish eligibility in the program. The eligibility criteria was established by New York State Department of Health. And in order to meet the eligibility criteria, a child needs to have a 33% delay in one area of development or 25% delays in 2 or more areas of development. A child's first evaluation is multidisciplinary, meaning that there are 2 people from 2 different disciplines, such as a speech therapist or a special educator, that do the evaluation. So there are some children that are, we call them that are automatically eligible for the program if they have a diagnosis with a high probability of developmental delay. Diagnoses include Down syndrome, autism, cleft palate. There's a pretty lengthy list of those diagnoses, but every child does still need a multidisciplinary evaluation to enter the program. So our program offers a variety of different services to meet children's individual needs, such as speech therapy, physical therapy, special education, teacher of the hearing impaired, social work, variety of services. Each child has an individualized family service plan. Many of you are familiar with IEPs, individualized education plans under school districts. Early intervention, it's very similar, but a family is a big part of that because we are working with children that are very young. And so we are working a lot with families in order to participate in the program and carry over the therapy. And then we will then assist families in transitioning to the program that comes after ours for kids that are 3 to 5 under the Committee on Preschool Special Education. So that's all I
I'm sorry,
have for now.
I have
Be
myself
happy to
on
answer
mute
any
because
questions.
I'm doing two different things.
Okay.
Sorry.
Well, I guess that leads right into Committee on Preschool Special Education and the transition process there. As people know that move from EI to CPSE, a child by the age of 3 is transitioned to Committee on Preschool Special Education. And a little bit of the focus changes at that point, because then we're really looking at their ability to learn within an academic type of setting. It's not as developmentally based, although it is still part of it. We're looking at the criteria for kids to be able to learn and benefit from their experiences with other children, hopefully in a class setting, if there is a class, and there are programs for kids. So prior to the age of 3, a parent has the right to ask for a conference with the CPSE chair of their school district. That conference is really not to talk about their individual child, although it's a very tempting thing to do. It's really to talk about the differences between early intervention and CPSE. In early intervention, it's very home-based. Everything is based in your living room. Once you transition into CPSE, we become a little more school-oriented. We are looking, as I said, into the ability for a child to benefit from being in an educational environment. It starts following the school calendar. No longer is it 52 weeks a year as it is in early intervention, but it is a school calendar type program, and it's divided up into 2 parts of the year: the school year, which is generally September through June, and 6 weeks in the summer. Not everyone is automatically qualified for extended school year or summer services. A child has to have significant delays or some extreme conditions as to why they're not making the progress that they should to be qualified for summer services. So those are some of the big differences making that change that are a little hard for parents, because again, we're no longer year-based, we're school calendar based. So there are holidays and breaks and such for that. Again, it's very much like early intervention. We're looking at a child's learning profile. We're looking at their strengths and their weaknesses, and their delays or array of just delays. A child can have delays in 1 or more areas to qualify for services. We provide services in speech, OT, physical therapy, teacher of the visually impaired, teacher of the deaf, integrated programming, self-contained programming. It really depends on the child's needs. To qualify for center-based program, a child has to have significant needs across most areas of the physical, social, emotional, cognitive, communication, motor. They need to have a pretty significant delay profile to qualify for those programs. We don't do it necessarily just on the basis of what your child's disability is. They may be classified as being on the spectrum. That doesn't automatically qualify them for a program. Okay, again, their array of needs is what qualifies them for a program. All right. So, and that program goes from age 3 to 5 until they enter school. And at one point, they enter school. It's a process very similar to from EI to CPSE. We have meetings, we explain the changes. Once a child comes into school age program, they must meet the qualifications of one of the 13 disability categories as established by the federal and state government. Up until this point, kids under CPSE are all called preschoolers with a disability. So there's no need to have a very specific thing. But again, we're looking at their profile, their needs, and we're servicing their needs. I know it's kind of a general overview of CPSE, but there are a lot of options as you come into CPSE. When you come out of early intervention, you have the right to stay in early intervention until you're 3. And sometimes that's necessary because this area has been very hard hit by lack of services. And while your child may qualify for a program, there may not be a program spot for them. So oftentimes we would recommend to a parent that they stay under early intervention until they become the age to transition or until an opening comes up. Just because you stay in early intervention doesn't stop you from getting a spot in a program. If a program came up a month after your meeting, we can change that transition for you and you can go on into programming. I think people tend to think it's all or nothing, and it truly isn't. We're really trying to meet the needs of children and parents. But I always say, keep that bird that's in the hand rather than not have your child have services. You may feel like it's not enough services for your child. That doesn't matter. Having any services is more important to keep your child going until we can get them into preschool age programming. So I think those are things you have to really think about as a preschool parent. Don't get too hung up. If you know your child's going to qualify for a program, but there's no program, keep your EI services until a program spot opens. CPSE chairs are generally very diligent in keeping track of those openings. And when they know there's something that's appropriate for your child, they will try to get you in early. They're not going to wait until, they said they're going to stay in EI until 3. I'm not going to worry about them until they're 3. That's not the way it works. We're always scanning, looking for the best option for your child. So I do want to say that because I've heard from some of my CPSE friends that parents are often confused about it. It's like, do I stay in EI? Do I move on early? My sense is when there's no services available, readily available, stay in EI. And then as soon as we find something, we will make that move with you. And I'm sure there's some confusion with that, and I'll be happy to answer questions with that. But that's one of the things I did want to get across today. I've done this for over 30 years. I just retired in July. So I'm still very familiar with what's going on in the Capital District area. And I know there's a shortage of service. Okay.
Awesome. So this is Helen popping in here. We've got a couple of questions in the chat. I'm going to start with the most recent question because it's on topic and then work my way backwards. So it says, what if they say that the child can no longer stay in early intervention and there still isn't a program available, question mark?
If a child has hit that 3-year-old mark and has to come under CPSE and there's no program available, a CPSE will work to provide as many itinerant service providers as they can to meet your child's need. It's not perfect or ideal by any stretch of the imagination, but we will work hard to try to get your child some service until we can get that opening for you. Does that answer your question, Renee?
I think it. We'll see if she put something in the chat. Okay. She said yes. The other question, this was asked a little bit earlier when Deirdre was talking. It says, can you talk about the transition meeting?
The transition meeting, again, is something that we've done it different ways in Albany and Schenectady County. We've tried doing group meetings for parents of all preschoolers that we're going to, or early intervention that we're going to be moving into preschool. And we've also done it individually with the CPSE chair. Basically, that meeting is just to talk about the differences in programming and the differences between the two ages of services. It's not to talk about your individual child or to talk about those services, but it's to talk about how the focus is changing. It's becoming less developmental, although that's part of it, and more educationally oriented. It's coming more into a child's ability to learn and work within an academic setting with other children. And that is the main difference. It's just to explain all those differences to you and explain the changes in calendar year and those things, explain things like transportation if your child's eligible, but just kind of talk about how all that fits together. It really is a nice way for a parent to understand we're moving out of our living room now and we're moving into the school district. We're going to meet probably online at this point. We've been doing that for the last couple of years, but we're no longer coming to your home. We are more based in the schools, and we're taking the focus and looking more at learning environments.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Another question we have is, and obviously, of course, Nancy, you're answering these questions fantastic, but if any of the other panelists have anything to add, don't be shy. Feel free to unmute yourself if you have anything to add. This question asks, can a CPSE student stay in pre-K programming even after they turn school age?
No, they cannot. That is the short answer. It's a resounding no. They cannot. At that point, they will be, if they're still eligible for services, it's under the Committee on Special Education, the CSE, School Age Programming. A parent, since kindergarten is not compulsory, a parent does not have to send their child to kindergarten, all right? But if they require services, a school district is not required to go into their home to give the services, or should they keep them in a daycare to go into a daycare to give those services. That is not part of the requirement. If a district feels a child qualifies for services such as speech and OT, the parent is keeping them in a preschool program. If a preschool program opts to stay, keep them, that's between the parent and the preschool program. But those services have to be delivered through the school district. And typically school districts will have the parent bring the child into their home school to have those services done. But they no longer can be considered a preschooler with a disability once they have turned school age. Does anyone else have anything to add with that?
Right. I don't see any more questions in the chat at this time. So if we want to pass the baton to one of our other panelists to give a little intro and background, that would be great.
Hi, I can go if that's okay. Tony, did you want to say something?
I was getting ready to say I would like for Tanya to speak to the criteria for moving in and out. What are you testing for? What does it tell you? And what the parents can learn from this.
Sure. So I'm Tanya Apker. I'm a school psychologist for Spotted Zebra Learning Center, and our role, as Nancy had mentioned earlier, a diagnosis does not drive programming. A diagnosis in and of itself does not determine what your child is eligible for or not. So part of what we do as evaluators, I do the psychological evaluation, the requirements when you get a multidisciplinary evaluation. Even if it's just speech articulation, we get this question a lot. I also have to conduct a psychological evaluation as part of the entire picture. And what that means is I'm really looking at how is the child developing to access learning and to comprehend it and respond to services. I look at things such as their cognitive development, their ability to solve problems, their ability to use language expressively and receptively, their ability to, their working memory and their ability to process information for their age level. And I use that information also with an adaptive behavior rating scale. It's good to know adaptively, and that was mentioned, families may recognize those areas from EI, early intervention. You know, we look at the social emotional component, communication, the basic self-help needs. You know, is a child toilet trained? Can they dress themselves? What does their child look like even physically? Can they access their environment? Can they manipulate fine motor tasks? All of that gives us an impression as to whether your child is able, and whether they're able to access these areas of skill, or do they need additional support and help to do so. I know I get a lot of psychological evaluation can be a bit intimidating when you see that word on an evaluation measure when parents are giving consent. We're not clinicians, we're not diving into your child's, psychological end of, their development in that sense. Our real goal is how are they able to access and be able to develop within a classroom setting and within their therapies. So I am trained, I was in the district for 10 years prior to this, so at the CPSE level as well as the CSE level. And right now, my evaluation measures are primarily with the ages 3 through 5. And the tools I use include standardized testing measures, such as what we call the WIPSI, the Wexler Preschool Primary Intelligence Scale for Children. And that looks at all those areas I just mentioned. It looks at their verbal comprehension, their visual spatial skills, their memory, processing speed, and students will work one-on-one with me, complete this activity, and then I get an idea of their cognitive profile. The scores are important because it does lead into what type of programming, what level of need is most important for your child. But it also includes a bigger picture of information. It's not just the scores, but how did the child access that information? How do they test? How do they handle frustration? How do they handle transitions? And were they able to emotionally regulate? Were they able to behaviorally regulate? So there's a lot of information that these standardized tests do offer and provide beyond just the needed scores and the data that it gives. All of it is a complete picture. And it works along with the speech and language, the OT, the PT as well. All of us evaluators put our information together to give you the best profile we can of your student, because that information is what's used to drive the programming and the decision-making on the CPSE and CSE level. If your child is in need of, has a significant level of delays across the board, that's where you're going to start looking. Least restrictive levels is related services enough, integrated program, or a self-contained level program. It gives us it gives us some ability to kind of steer our focus into what's going to be the least restrictive, but the best support for your child. And yep, that's pretty much it right now, unless you have additional questions.
Yes, we've got a few questions in the chat. So the first one says, is the psychologist required as part of the EIMDE?
That is probably for Deirdre, because it is required at the CPSE and CSE level.
No, it is not. An early intervention evaluation is multidisciplinary, and part of that team could be, really a variety of disciplines. It's based on the child's needs or the parent's concerns. So, for example, if the parent's concern is the child isn't talking, which is a very common referral that we receive, there will be a speech and language pathologist present, and then there'll be somebody else from a different discipline. That could be a special educator, it could be a school psychologist, it could be a physical therapist. It's somebody else from a different discipline that can assess the other areas of development in addition to, the primary area of concern. I hope that answers your question.
Awesome, thank you. The next question is, what is the process for a child to receive an autism evaluation?
If you're looking for an ASD diagnosis, that would go through a developmentalist or a clinician. We at this level as a school psychologist, we do not diagnose. We do not offer diagnoses. What we do is we gather the information to determine, again, where your child is performing and functioning, what their levels of strengths and weaknesses are, developmentally, where are they landing, and what their needs look like. Part of our discussion, part of my discussion with parents is being open and honest and opening that entry of first figuring out what has been what has been the discussion up to that point. Where are the parents in the process? And here are some things that my testing is showing, or what my observations and the team is showing. And the first thing first is, what has been their intervention prior to that point? Is this the first time they're ever even receiving intervention? A lot of things can be answered through that. Is once they get services in there, let's see where their progress goes. Are they responding to speech and OT and PT, or to programming? And then if a parent ever wants additional information as far as an autism diagnosis, or to kind of get confirmation or consultation, we always recommend for that level of information, a developmentalist or a clinician would be the go-to person for you.
Right.
What I include in my testing would be not only the psychological, and if they can't do standardized testing, I also have a questionnaire observation form called the DAISY that I use that gives us some information cognitively where your child's developing, as well as behavior rating scales and social emotional support in the adaptive rating scales. All of that information goes into an assessment to give you as much foundation of how is your child performing in all those different areas of development compared to other children their age.
And that's excellent, Tanya. That's a good overview of all of that. We may discuss, that the things that we're seeing are characteristics of, but we do not diagnose. We do recommend you see a developmentalist or a clinician, or we're very lucky in this area to have the Center for Autism and Related Developmental Disabilities. They also do evaluations, and that can be accessed through the developmental pediatrics as well. So that is how a parent would go about looking for an autism diagnosis, is to look to the developmentalist card or a private clinician. I'd say the most comprehensive would be to go through the developmental people. They really have a lot
within
of
the home or
experience.
within school?
Within
Okay.
both.
So right now we had our CSE meeting yesterday with Christy, mom. She was here. We really had hoped that Haven would have been at the meeting, but Haven was not at the meeting. She was home sick. Mom's concern is
Hold on.
that,
one thing I just want to mention. I'm
anxiety,
sorry, not to
she's
cut you off.
also able to manipulate the situation.
Not to cut you off, but we do like to try to keep the scenarios without using real names, just for the privacy of the people that we're talking about. So I just wanted to jump in and say that
Helen, can I also add, Parent to Parent, is also a sponsor of this, and people such as myself are here, and we're always available to talk to parents about individual situations if they would like to talk about what's going on. I guess it's a shameless plug. I don't mean it to be shameless. I just want it to be helpful. But 518-381-4370, you can always call us for specific situations to talk to us about. I'll just throw that in there. That might help some folks. But I think what Helen's saying is we've got to kind of keep it a little more general here so that we can get all the information out.
Yes. Okay, so another question that we have is, this person is just saying that they're very educated in this area, but it's still very overwhelming to grasp it all. It says, what makes a successful meeting with parents? What do you find is very difficult to convey successfully? What else would you like to see be available to help with teaching parents about what EI is, what CPSE is, and why is all this bureaucracy involved instead of seamless service for the child once they are in the system? I know that is a lot to unpack, but if we've got a great panel here, so whatever we're able to contribute is greatly appreciated.
I can start. I'm very sorry that you had that experience in early intervention. Well, and I can totally understand how the whole experience could be very overwhelming to families. In early intervention, each family is assigned a service coordinator, and the service coordinator's job is really to explain the process to families and walk through it with them. And that is the resource that families have in early intervention, to be there as a resource about explaining the whole program, about a family's rights in the program, about resources of support in the community. So, you know, it still is not a perfect system, but, you know, this is what we aim for in early intervention. And I'm always available as well to families. Anybody can call me, and if there's any questions or concerns about a child's early intervention services.
I'll jump in, I guess. What I would say is, especially when you're moving into the CPS area, it's good to talk to the CPSE chair and to start letting them know who you are, so they get to know you as well. I think it is an overwhelming system. It's overwhelming because you're dealing with a lot of intellectual things as well as emotional. This is your child, this is your heart. And no one wants to see their child suffer or have any disability or any difficulty of any kind. So there's a big emotional thing there as well. So I think it's important for you to reach out to all the people that can help you. Early intervention can be wonderful. You just have to be patient with us. People can't always get to you right away, but they are there and they have a lot of information. Let your CPSE chair know who you are and where things are and what you're looking at. What makes a meeting successful is for you as a parent to kind of try to get, if you can, before a meeting, write down questions, try to put together your thoughts. Even if it seems zany to you, write it down, bring it up so we can discuss it at a meeting, or you can discuss it with your early intervention coordinator or your CPSE chair. Those things will all help. The bureaucracy, there's a structure to everything. That is what this life is, and we're not going to get rid of it, but we need to learn how to work it better and to move through it easier. That's why there are organizations such as Parent to Parent Network, Parent to Parent of New York State, and parent networks and such all around. They're also there to help you, to give you information. The internet is a powerful tool as well. It can get confusing and you need some help to translate some of that. Just reach out and talk to people. Just don't stop talking to people. Don't stay buried. Don't stay isolated. Just talk to us and we'll help you make the meeting as successful as possible, because that's our goal. That's our job, and we take it very, very serious. We want it to be a seamless process. We want it to be appropriate. And that's the other thing. We have to operate within the confines of all the regulations that we have, but we're looking at working with your child and with you to the best of our abilities to help them to get to the best of their abilities. So communication, that's what it really all boils down to. If you communicate to a lot of people, we will communicate back and we will help you get where you need to do. Don't stop asking questions. I will have parents that would call me one day and they call me the next day and then they call me another day. They said, I'm so sorry. And I said, that's okay. As long as you have a question and I can answer it, I'm happy to answer it so that you kind of have a better sense. It's a hard feeling as a parent to have a child that has any kind of need that you as the parent cannot meet on your own. So just keep that in mind. We realize that. So just have patience and communicate. That's my 2 cents. I don't know if anyone else would like to add anything. Tracy, maybe?
Hi, everybody. I'm Tracy Keelar, and I am a parent of a probably older than many people on the call. My son Jude is 25 years old, and my nephew Messiah is 18 years old. And I've been navigating, I think, this system for quite some time with the help of many people on the call. And I appreciate everybody that's here, both the educators and leaders and the parents. I did want to address that this issue of feeling overwhelmed and the system being hard, because I've been there, and I can't remember a lot of things anymore, but I can strongly remember when I felt good, when it surrounded my son Jude, and when I felt really, really bad. And so those emotions and feelings are very strong, and they're real. And I just wanted to validate for anybody that's feeling overwhelmed and feeling like what is going on and how come people aren't listening and I'm not getting my services for my kids or what I need. But I would like to say that and I do want to comment on Nancy talking about the bureaucracy. One thing that I learned, and I probably burned some bridges along the way, is that there is this bureaucracy, but it is not the people on this call. The people on this call that are at the CSE meetings or that are your service coordinators are really doing their job and following this bureaucracy that's been created and has trickled down. So that's something that it took me a while to learn, to kind of sit at the table and not see the people across me as the enemy, but as somebody that really is doing their job and has chosen this field to work with our kids who have special needs. And so, and I am embarrassed to say that it took me a long time, many, many years to do that, but I was in fight mode for a really long time. And so once I was able to recognize that I wanted them to know me and my family and my child, and recognize that I needed to know them and where they're coming from too, everything seemed to go a little bit smoother for me. But I do want to say that you're definitely not alone. Parent to Parent is a great resource, but other parents are great resources too, because once you get on the phone or you meet somebody that's been there, we've all had the same situations and the same feelings. So connecting with other parents, and anybody's welcome to call me, and you can, run anything by me. I'm happy to listen. I think that's really important. That's where I found my most support, especially going into a CPSE or a CSE meeting, is from other parents. The other thing that I would recommend is when you go to your meetings is to, and with COVID, it's a little bit different, but, and I'm not sure after COVID what it's going to look like, but bring a parent advocate with you, even if it's just somebody to take notes, because those meetings can be very emotional and you may forget some really key elements. And so just bring somebody. I think I've always brought a parent advocate with me, and it's just helped me and my husband, who's been at the meetings as well, to just feel like I have that extra support. I have somebody writing things down, and that's been very helpful. I'd also recommend, and I'm not sure if you're going to talk about this on the call, but applying for Medicaid waiver as soon as you can, because there's supports with the waiver program. And that goes along with your service coordinator, because the folks that worked with my son throughout his childhood, I think sometimes, I felt like they were saving my life. Sometimes I felt like they were saving my marriage, so getting other people in that can really be supportive to your family. And the last thing that I just wanted to mention, that was just mentioned, was the service coordinator. So your service coordinator is a great resource, but if you don't click with your service coordinator ask for another one. It's really important that if you in your gut and your heart don't feel like this is working for your child and your family, like say, I got to move on, I have to find somebody else, because if you kind of hang in there with somebody, it doesn't help. It doesn't get better. So you have a right to say, like, this person is not working with me, for my child. So, and sometimes that's hard to do because you feel like they're doing a service for you, but, as we all do, take care of our kids in every way. This is another way to take care of your child and your family too. So thank you for listening.
Thank you, Tracy, for bringing that up about your right as a parent to choose your service coordinator. And how a parent can do that is they would call their early intervention official. That would be me in Albany County, but every county has somebody that's in my role. And yeah, it happens all the time. And sometimes you don't click with somebody, and it's important that you do while you're in our program. And the contact information for every early intervention official in New York State is on the New York State Early Intervention website.
Awesome. Now we've got a few questions, and I apologize if this conversation has been so fluid that some of these questions may now seem like we're going back a little bit, but I want to make sure that everyone's questions are asked. It says here.
Excuse me, Helen.
Yep.
Before you read another question, I do have a comment as I've been listening. One of the documents that is given to parents at a meeting is their rights. And if you must read it. Parents, I can't stress enough the reading it, because information that you need, that you will require for how you go about questioning, how you find out about getting other services, they are in that document. So, really you need to read the document to know where you can or what help you can seek. I just wanted to bring that up.
Awesome. Thanks, Tony. So the next question says, if the student transitions from CPSE to CSE, the student can, oh, this isn't a question, this is a comment, but I'll still read it. If the student transitions from CPSE to CSE, the student can maintain programming in a pre-K setting if the parent does not want to enroll them in kindergarten and the program and the parent agree. The only thing would be the district would provide the services.
I need to clarify, as I said, if a child is school age, still qualifies for an IEP under the Committee on Special Education, the school district is responsible for those services. A parent can hold their child out of school and do things, but they will not receive those services in a preschool setting. They will be asked to bring their child more than likely to a school district home school to receive those services. So it's not that you can just arbitrarily keep them little for another year. Those services aren't provided in a preschool setting, and many preschool programs will not take school-aged children as well. So I don't want to, what I'm saying is if you keep them out, the district has to provide those services, but generally it's going to be in the school district facility.
I just want to add, the only time that might change, I'm Sherry Canfield from Spotted Zebra, is if the child becomes enrolled in a private kindergarten. And again, the kindergarten would have to be approved through New York State. And so, for example, Spotted Zebra has a private kindergarten where we enroll children. It's privately paid for by the parents. And so if a child who has an IEP enrolls in that kindergarten, then there's a number of formal documents that must be followed through by a June 1st deadline with the school districts. And that IEP would then become the responsibility of the school district where the kindergarten is located. So for that period of the kindergarten year, then the school district of location is responsible for providing the services. And again, those services can be provided wherever the school district decides to provide them. Some of them will ask for the child to come directly to the school district to get speech services. Others will have a partnership. Spotted Zebra is blessed to have a partnership that we developed with Nancy so that services can still be provided within the classroom at Spotted Zebra, but it is privately paid for by families. And the services are just provided by the therapist, both within South Colony School District and Spotted Zebra.
And at that point, it is considered a individualized education service plan because it's a dual enrollment by the parent, a private placement under the CSE. And yes, we do have a special arrangement with the Spotted Zebra. So that is a good distinction, Sherry. I didn't even go there when people said they were going to keep them in a preschool setting.
Yeah, it can't. And we've had that request as well. Can I please stay in one of the preschool classrooms? And that is not possible. And even if your child does go to a private kindergarten, their summer of their kindergarten year is back in their home school district, and services are provided by their home school.
So it's very important when you're in those situations that you are talking to your CPSE and CSE chair much earlier than June 1st, because there is a hard and fast deadline.
Great. Another question that came through, it says, has anyone made an effective EI to CPSE packet that can help CPSE chairs with all of this? If so, would you mind sharing?
Well, I know we at Albany County, I know we had a packet a while ago, especially when we were doing the meetings, the group meetings. So I don't know where those all went to.
And we still have them, Nancy.
Okay, so
Yeah.
talk to Deidre. She's a great, good source of information. I'm sure I have it in one of my boxes somewhere, but that would be the place to get the information.
Yeah, we do give those to families. Also, the Bureau of Early Intervention website also has resources about the transition process that are pretty detailed. So that would be a good place to look as well.
Great, thank you. This question says, due to individual development, what age would you recommend for an evaluation? Example would be a speech delay.
I would definitely use your pediatrician as a resource. And also there's some great websites such as the CDC website, Learn Signs. That's a great one to go to. Early intervention is not an at-risk program, so we generally don't recommend that children are referred unless there really is a concern. I will say that a lot of children don't meet the eligibility criteria that are referred to our program because these children in early intervention are very young. And sometimes children will come through 2 or 3 times because they didn't meet the eligibility criteria the first time, and then later on they do, because we are just looking at the child at one point in time. We don't have a crystal ball. We can't say, unless the child has a diagnosis with a high probability of developmental delay, if there's going to be a delay in the future. So unfortunately, that is sometimes what happens with some children that are referred.
There is really no hard and fast rule at what age to do that. I think it really depends, as Deidre said, on the child and how they present across the board in all areas. Speech delays can be tricky. In early intervention, they're really looking for the ability to communicate and to get their thoughts across. But they're not looking at articulation Articulation and the ability to be understood is more at the 3-year-old level at CPSE. So there are various levels of speech delays and types of delays. So that's a tough one. I think I agree that it's real important to kind of work with your pediatrician for them to kind of help determine if they think it's extraordinary or out of the ordinary, if they think it's time for a developmentalist or not. But it's very hard with language and speech and language delays to determine when to pull a developmental in. If there are other delays you're seeing, such as motor delays and such, it may be a good time to start getting into the developmentalist. But I think your pediatrician will be your best bet at helping you to navigate that field. Or, you know, as a parent, use your gut. We should never underestimate what we think as a parent. If we think we have a concern, don't underestimate that at all. We're all parents, and most of us have all dealt with having children with special needs. So if you've got a nagging feeling and you feel it's time to see a developmentalist, don't look for someone else. You know, do your thing. Get your information.
Yeah, someone.
If I can jump in, this is Tina Beauperlant. I saw something in one of the messages, and somebody asked me to kind of chime in real quick. Above and beyond the educational advocacy that we do also help with OPWD services, but we also have a parent matching program. We have parents who volunteer, and they could be preschool age, they could be elementary, middle school, high school. So if parents are looking to try to talk to another parent to understand if they should or shouldn't go through a developmental eval, or kind of what they think might be going on, we can help match them up with other families. We have families who go through trainings, who are willing to talk to other families and pass on the knowledge and things that they have learned. I don't think a lot of us as parents realize the wealth of information that we have in our heads to share until somebody says, hey, have you been through this? And then all of a sudden you realize all this knowledge that you have and that you share. So if people need help with that, don't hesitate to give us a call, because we are statewide, and everybody on here today is from various parts of the state. So we can help with the matching. We can help people understand, you know, OPWD. We can help you with education stuff. We can also help with just talking to another parent to kind of give you some ideas as to what the path ahead might look like, or some ideas of what they suggest you may or may not want to do. So we're here to do that. I just kind of want to put that out there, because it seems like there's a lot of questions, and people are kind of, you know, they're just not sure, and everybody's answering a lot of great questions. I love all the presenters and the answers that they're giving. But once we get off of here, people need to know, where do we go to continue this to get the support that they need? So I just want to make sure that I put that out there.
Yes, and something I was going to add too, that was from the chat, which kind of goes off of what Nancy was saying, which was trust your gut as a parent when it comes to when you get the evaluation. This says, look at milestones for children to see if you as a parent feel your child is delayed. So just kind of echoing, go with your gut. I see Tracy has her hand up, so I'll let her chime in.
Hi, everybody. I just wanted to thank you, Tina, for sharing that. And I just wanted to acknowledge that it can be very isolating and lonely sometimes, having especially a new child or a younger child who has a special need, especially if you're, you know, just starting your family and your friends are starting your family, and you have friends that have kids that are typically developing, and, you know, all of a sudden you just feel like these are not my people anymore, you know? And so sometimes you can still have your people that you've, you know, kind of been friends with, and you've, you know, had kids with at the same time, but, you know, sometimes you find yourself with some new people that really do understand you and understand what you're going through. And the other thing I wanted to say is, there's really, all of these great resources are out here, but you also for the parents here are agents of change as well. And I remember when Jude, so again, Jude's 25 years old. So when he was little, we could not find a play group that we fit into. Like it just didn't we'd go to a play group and Jude would tear everything out of the cupboards and, we just couldn't find a place to fit in. And so we started our own play group, and Sherry started Spotted Zebra. And so, there's things that we can do as parents if we're not getting our needs met, if there's a gap, if there's something that we need, sometimes it's not out there, but I'm sure there's other like-minded people that could help, create something. So don't underestimate if you have an idea, or if you need some support, there are people out there.
Thank you so much, Tracy. Another question that we have, well, this again just echoes what we were talking about before in terms of how to have a successful meeting and things like that. Someone said, with the explosion of social media groups and information on the internet, like YouTube, do you all think that that has helped parents grasp the EICPSE process and the program, their understanding of the program?
I will just quickly say, I think it has helped, but I think sometimes it gives a false message too, because it makes it seem like everything is sweeping and everybody is eligible for everything. And I think you have to be careful about what is out there on social media. I think there is a lot to be had there, but you have to be very discerning, and that's when you need other people to help you kind of decipher that. So I think you have to be careful. That's my 2 cents on social media.
I agree with Nancy as well. And there are some wonderful resources out there. I had mentioned the CDC website. There's also some wonderful parent groups out there. New York State Early Intervention has a parents Facebook page that parents can join. And there's also a lot of other resources for parents to access. But like Nancy said, there are some places that are not good sites to go to. I am the aunt of 3 nephews in the autism spectrum. And I know my sister, when her kids were young, was in a vulnerable place. And there are some places out there that are not good for parents that are in that position. And now she looks back on it and she's like, wow, that was not a good place to go. But yeah.
The other thing I will mention is that it's again, we're all saying the same thing: reach out to people, find people who you can talk to, because the process also differs in each county and in each state. So, when we talk about a bureaucracy, again, it's a complicated process. And when I first started Spotted Zebra, probably had I known then what I know now, I may not have been so bold, but talk to your county representatives, talk to your service coordinators, talk to people in those counties, because each county, each school district does it a little bit differently. And so I know families find it very frustrating, for instance, when they call and they're in the evaluation process, that transition, and they want to go look at all of the options. I was one of those people. And you want to go see what schools are available for your child and what might be a good fit, but you're doing it a little bit blindly. And so many of the programs should be saying, let's go through the process. Let's do your evaluation. Let's see what that evaluation tells us about what would be best for your child, what kind of a setting would make them most successful. And then you go look at programs. So I know some families get very frustrated because here in New York State, we are in, at least in upstate New York, we try and go through a process, and we don't want to dangle a program out there that might not be best for a child. And so again, just talk to people. I do a lot of talking when people call me on the phone. I probably do a little bit more education than I do talking about spotted zebra because it is very complicated and overwhelming.
Tracy, I'm not sure if your hand is up or if you forgot to lower it from
No,
last time.
sorry. I'm sorry if I'm talking too much, but
Not at all.
I just wanted to, Sherry, you said something that I think is really important for us as family members and others as professionals is definitely to get to know the family because there's still a lot of barriers for many families in terms of getting services and accessing services. And so we can't assume that somebody can hop in a car and go and, go to a program or can afford a program there's still a lot of racial and socioeconomic barriers to services. Services may be free if you qualify for them, but there's a whole lot going on in many of our families that if you don't get to know us, you're not going to know how that's just not going to work for us. So I really appreciate, Sherry, that you said that that's a big part of your job.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, this is a shift, but a very important question. It says, it was directed to Tracy, but others may have something to add. It says, what are Medicaid waivers? How do you learn that you can find a parent advocate and what that experience was like? And as I mentioned, Tracy, this one was directed to you. I see that you put the information in the chat, but if you have some background information on it, great. If not, this is actually an area that I'm somewhat familiar with, so would be able to
I'll
add.
just share my experience, and then I know that there's so many more people that can explain it more, but when Jude was little, we were really struggling we didn't have a family. I do have, my mom has MS, is in a wheelchair, and my sister has a son with autism, on the autism spectrum. And so we didn't really have a family support, and we were struggling, and we didn't have enough money to hire somebody to help us. We had other kids. And so another parent told me, and my son Jude has Down syndrome, just so everybody knows. Another parent told me about the waiver program, and we applied for waiver. And since then, our waiver services, and he still continues to get waiver services, includes respite, ComHab, community habilitation, which means he has somebody that comes into the house and takes him out places. Respite is more in the house. And I'm not sure if things have changed, so you guys can all share. Also, we had several environmental modifications through Medicaid waiver. When Jude was little, he was a runner, and we lived on a busy street, so we had a fence that was paid for through Medicaid waiver so that he was safe. And Medicaid, which was really important because Jude has a lot of medical challenges. And so without Medicaid, there's no way we would have been able to afford, all of the medical situations that Jude was in. I think for us, that's very important, but really the support that we received with being able to have staff, and still to this day to have staff, not only is staff there to help teach Jude and to keep him safe and to offer us support also, but for Jude, staff are also his friends. And so friends have not come easy, and throughout Jude's life. And so he has these friends that, I know probably it's not supposed to be there for his friends, but they're his company and his socialization. And they've not only taught him how to socialize, but they've made him feel special, and they've made him feel like other kids in our family who get a phone call and they are, going out and going to the movies or something. Jude's life is not exactly like that. And so the Medicaid waiver program has provided some concrete services, but it's also provided social emotional support that he's really needed throughout his life.
Medicaid waiver programs are not for all children with disabilities, but for kids with certain disabilities and a certain level of moderate to severe disability. My son has cerebral palsy. He qualified for Medicaid waiver at a fairly young age at 3. And that does provide things like support, like Tracy talked about, the COMHAB workers and the respite, the environmental modifications, like we needed bathrooms to be handicapped accessible in our bathrooms. So we were able to get grants to get those bathrooms made that way. Basically, oftentimes people that are evaluating your child or programs that your child is evaluating or is working with your child can kind of help you, and the CPSE and even early education intervention providers can talk to you about whether they feel it's time for you to start looking for Medicaid waiver services, and they can help you get started along that. Many preschools have social workers that also help parents get started with that. You can go to the website for Office of People with Developmental Disabilities, OPWDD, and start getting information. You can call organizations such as Parent to Parent of New York State. They can help you as well to determine whether your child might be eligible for those services. I just, to be honest about it, a child has to have a certain level of need of services to qualify for those services. And they do, it is a Medicaid waiver, and it does help with medical needs as well. My son, my insurance pays for part of his leg AFO's orthotic braces, and Medicaid disability waiver pays for the rest of those. I don't have to pay the copay. He has seizure medications, which are about $1,200 a month. Medicaid waiver picks up what your insurance does not pick up. So there's a lot of things that it can do to help support families during that time, both emotionally, socially, and physically and medically. Can help you with the mobility devices and things of that nature. But typically, doctors, social workers, providers can help you determine when to get started looking for those services, because oftentimes, unless a child has a pretty severe disability, they're not really diagnosed at an early age. So once you have that diagnosis of something, that's really when it starts kicking into the Medicaid waiver. I don't know if anyone else agrees with that or not.
Thank you for sharing that. Another question that we have in the chat is, how does the move to preschool for all shift the way that services are being delivered?
Okay. So when your child is in EI, and I experienced that, as Tracy mentioned, I started Spotted Zebra for my son, who was diagnosed on the autism spectrum when he was 3 years of age. He actually started to get EI services when he was 2. It was the best thing that you could ever hope for. EI is just wonderful, and you don't know about it until you actually need it. And then, so my son was getting services. We had probably 8 to 10 services each week in our home. And when it came time to transition, I remember feeling that I couldn't let go of my providers. You develop a real bond with your providers who are there in your home, seeing everything, becoming your friends, becoming your sounding board. But once the child is approved for a preschool program, then depending on what they're approved for, the providers change. And so if they're approved for an integrated program or a self-contained classroom, then those providers will be in the actual school itself. And I know that many families, including myself, started to feel like, well, I don't want to give up my providers. But one of the things that happens is that the goals and the therapies start to surround education. What does my child need in order to be successful in a classroom? That's the key thing at the preschool age. It leaves family-centered and becomes more educationally driven. And so when you have a team of providers who are working with your children in the classroom, they all know the goals. They all know what that child is trying to achieve. Even the early childhood teachers who may not be a therapist or a special education teacher. So it becomes something that is more of a team approach for that child. And it's typically hard for families who are coming out of EI, but it does provide a very well-rounded process for both the child and the family.
I don't know if this is an appropriate place for this or not, but I did want to make one mention. I know when people are looking at, when their child qualifies for a program, center-based program, everyone has a feeling that an integrated program is far superior to a self-contained program. And again, you can't take a general view like that. It really depends on your child and what your child needs. Programming is fluid. It changes as your child's needs change. If your child's coming into CPSE and has very little communication, throwing them in an integrated program is not always the best answer because they can't communicate and get the benefit from that. They may need to be in a smaller self-contained program for a while to establish a communication system. Once they've got that communication system going, we may look to put them back, we may look to put them in an integrated program so that they can benefit from that program and use the skills that they've learned. Sometimes children do not learn those skills within an integrated program. I think every child is different and there's really no good and bad. And people have a lot of misconceptions that self-contained is bad and integrated is good. They're both great programs. It just depends on what your child needs, and keeping in mind that programs are supposed to be fluid. And your child's supposed to get what they need when they need it. They may need a self-contained program for a year. They may need it for 6 months. They may really need an integrated program, but it isn't a good or bad choice. And, you know, parents often, well, I want my child with typical kids. Well, sometimes that works well for our kids, and sometimes it's too overwhelming for them. And they shut down even more and isolate within an integrated setting. So you have to kind of sit back and listen to the people in the programs and to the people working with your child to try to figure out what's going to be the best opportunity for your child to grow. I can't stress that enough. I don't know a CPSE chair alive that wouldn't move your child out of a self-contained program when they were ready to be in an integrated program. Don't feel that when you're in one thing, you're never going to change to another thing. We really are looking at children and where they're at and helping them build their strengths. So I just want to kind of put that out there. It's just one of the things I thought of when I thought about coming to this panel today, is that there is a preconceived notion that only integrated programming, center-based programming is good, but that's not necessarily true. While it's all good programming, you've got to look at honestly where your child is and what they're going to benefit from, because you want them to grow. And sometimes being in a smaller environment will help them grow faster than having them overwhelmed in an environment that they're not quite ready for.
Thank you for sharing that, Nancy. And people are in the chat saying how good of a point and important of a point that is to make. I don't see any questions in the chat right now. So if people
I
any
have a
questions-
comment, Helen, and
Perfect.
I'll address this to any and everyone on the panel. Probably first starting with Tanya in terms of assessments, and then, to Nancy, as in the CPSE. But do children automatically move from EI to CPSE to CSE? And can a child have one service and then not get it as they move to the next one? What is that criteria for them to move?
Good question. No, it's not an automatic process. Each transition, you're looking at how that level of programming meets your child's needs. So in the EI, as you had mentioned, developmentally, that's the focus. It's more holistic. It's looking at all different facets. You move over to CPSE, you're now looking, accessing education. You're also considering developmental. I'm not saying that's not part of it. That's a part of it. But how is that child's developmental level and ability to access learning? Where does that bring their level of needs, which may look very differently. You may have a child who was receiving just speech or OT, but then they're transitioning to CPSE, and through the evaluations, the needs to access a classroom and to access learning may be stronger. Their needs may be stronger than what the child currently needed at the previous level. So that's when you may not need to start talking about programming that you mentioned. Related services may not be enough. Just having speech and OT may not be enough to help that child get through and access and benefit from that learning environment, as Nancy was talking about earlier. And that's where you're looking at the integrated and or the programming, depending on where that child's level of need is. And I couldn't have said it better, Nancy, the way you explained it, of just being able to benefit from what that program offers and what that program gives, of where's that child developmentally and in cognitively, social, emotionally, behaviorally, how can they access that information? And it is fluid. It's fluid even within the CPSE motion, because as kids progress, you always want to look at that too, of least restricted environment. How is their progression getting them to the next level? And what do we need to offer them for services then? I've had kids who went from integrated to just related services. I've had kids go from related services to graduating out of services entirely, and vice versa, and go in the other direction. It really is a fluid process and developmentally changing. And as you get those services that you need, you have to relook and revisit. And that's why you have those annual reviews. You look at them annually, if not sooner, depending on the needs. And then you go to CSE. And again, the focus is, of course, accessing, it's the educational level, and you have to fall into those criteria, the 13 different levels of classification. And with some of those does come very specific guidelines. Even at the CPSE level and EI level, 33% delay, when you're looking at the numbers and the data coming from standardized testing, you need a 33% delay in one area or two areas with a 25% delay. And yes, your child may have, I'll go with speech, for example. If a child has a speech delay, yes, there may be challenges in understanding your child or your child being able to consistently be understood with a strong percentage. But if they're not meeting that eligibility requirement, then it's not saying that your child doesn't have some challenge, some areas of difficulty. It's just you have to meet that eligibility to receive those services through CPSE or through CSE. And I think that, in my experience, has been hard for parents to understand and to even, even as us as educators, of you can see they're struggling, they're challenged in this, but they're not eligible for services. And we always say, especially with speech, 6 months later, revisit if you're not seeing the progress you're looking for, because at every age developmentally, the expectations and the standardizations may change and do change. You have a certain level of, when I do my testing, you're a 3-year-old, you are compared to other 3-year-old children your age. You're 4, you're compared to other 4-year-olds. If you are not making the expected rate of progress, then we can revisit your level of needs at that time. I hope that answered your question, Tony.
Sorry, I
think-
was on mute.
It's okay.
Yes, it does. I just wanted you to speak that, from the different perspectives too. And I'm sure Nancy has a very interesting perspective since she straddled both sides.
Yeah, I've done it all, so to speak. Birth to 21. So I think, Tanya, you hit the nail on the head. It really changes as the child needs change, and we do try to adapt to that. I think people get nervous when they are going from CPSE to CSE, and a child all of a sudden is no longer showing the great deficits that they are. They've had services since they were 2.5, and all of a sudden you're saying they're not going to receive any services. So I think that's very hard for families to understand, but that's what we're striving for the whole time, is to get them within that appropriate range for a child their age. With their skills. And it's hard to understand when you've been used to looking at your child as having a special need to finally say, oh, they're the same as other kids. And in some respects, they might even be functioning higher than kids coming into kindergarten because they haven't had the interventions. But when we go into CPSE to CSE, what we try to look at, and many schools now have a very strong response to intervention program. Which means that we're providing children with services prior to them failing. And I think that's a very important thing. When I have a child coming from CPSE to CSE and they no longer qualify for speech, say, I might do a response to intervention program for speech for a 6 to 8 week program and set up some goals to make sure that child is functioning where they need to be with the speech therapist. And at that point, it becomes not a CSE process, but it becomes a classroom and speech therapist process. Then the classroom teacher and the speech therapist work with the parent to see where the child is at, to see if they still need intervention. Or we may take a child and we may keep an IEP because they have apraxia and they need a significant level of speech. And we provide that for them. But it does change totally according to the child's needs. When we get to the classroom and school age, we try to do as much as we can within a classroom setting or within a group setting, because kids at that age have finally started moving out of that egocentric area where it's only them, and they've discovered other kids and they start learning more from other kids. So we do things like small speech groups and little groups in classrooms and things, and kids learn more from other kids and they enjoy it more. That's another thing that many parents fear moving from CPSE to CSE, but they're not going to get individualized services anymore. Well, they'll get them if they need them, but really to put it in the least restrictive environment and the most appropriate learning environment, many kids, especially in speech and even OT and PT, oftentimes learn best in small groups with 1 or 2 other children. They learn how to generalize their gains. They learn how to do them in the larger classroom. What you find when you keep kids in an individual setting at school age, I will tell you, not been researched, but I can tell you after 35 years, I've seen it happen more often than not. Kids that worked in small groups take that skill and bring it to the classroom and use it consistently. Kids that are only one-on-one with an adult don't bring that skill back to the classroom. They are so conditioned to working within that one little room with that one person that they don't generalize it into the classroom. So there's a lot of changes in how servicing changes as you get older, and people get a little concerned that it's not as individualized. It's still individualized in terms of the plan for what your child's needs are. It just might not be one-on-one. It might be a small group. It might be a resource room. It might be this, it might be that. So it changes. And again, we're really looking at the child. Least restrictive environment isn't a bad thing. It's really saying we want your child to get their services in the most natural environment for them at that point in time of their education. And sometimes least restrictive environment is an individual session, but sometimes it's a session in a small group, or it's in the classroom. So I think we have to be open and keep those words wide open and realize they can mean many, many things.
Thank you. Thank you, Nancy. Thank you. I have another thing I'd like someone to comment on. How is progress measured and how is it communicated?
Well, I will do the technical thing and then I will let program folks kind of chime in. Progress is measured by the goals set up in the IEP. There are goals set up with benchmarks, objectives. In preschool, we still have objectives. Once we get to school age, unless you're an alternatively assessed child, you don't have objectives. But people are taking data, and we're more data driven than we've ever been in our life, taking actual work that the children do and charting their progress so that we can answer those questions. Every quarter, you get a progress note home. It's telling you where the child is with that goal, okay? And what data they take is spelled out in your IEP. It will tell you what criteria they're going to look at, what method they're taking things, and what they're hoping to get the child to. So that's how we're looking at progress. We're looking at the goals on the IEP. We're also taking in all the other information as well as a student as a whole. I don't want to say there's no place for that. There is, but when we're looking at services, first and foremost, we need to make progress on those individual goals. Okay, I'll be quiet.
I'd like to hear from Sherry, who has a program. So all these little children are in your program, and how are you charting their progress?
So each of the therapists throughout the year will look at the goals, as Nancy had said, and the objectives, and then they'll chart how that child is doing. And that visual will help us to see whether that child is progressing, whether that child is standing still, whether there's progress being made. It helps us with determining whether that child is eligible for extended school year services, which again is not a given unless that child is truly regressing at a significant rate when they're not in program. But another critical part of all that, and I think, again, as a parent, you have a right to then talk to your school and talk to your therapist and ask them questions about the reports. How do they get to that point? How are they doing? What does this report say? Sometimes, you send a report and it looks like a lot of mumbo jumbo or things that you're not used to. And so we always encourage families to meet with us, talk with us. We do it always before an annual review meeting, but we open our doors at all times. And if we can't do it in person, which we're not right now, we do it remotely. But the more that the parent is involved and understands the progress or the lack thereof that their child is making, then the better advocate that they can be for their child. I hope that answered that question, Tony.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have one last comment I'd like someone to speak to. When a child is in CSE and they've been declassified, they can still receive a certain amount of services. Does this happen under EI or CPSE?
Okay, since I cover all three areas, I guess.
Yeah.
I guess that question is for me. I'm sorry. I feel like I'm monopolizing the panel.
But see, you're that bridge between a lot of different areas,
I am bridge. I'm as big as a bridge.
And see, and I used to do that too. That's why I know to ask those questions.
And it's a great question. If a child is no longer eligible under early intervention, there is no capability of getting services. They can be reassessed by the CPSE. Say a child has speech or OT, and they no longer meet that eligibility. They're tested for CPSE and they're not eligible at that time. If there's a concern with speech or motor area or whatever area at any point, they can a parent can ask for reevaluation to look at those needs, okay? In CPSE, if a child is declassified and they go into CSE, and a parent is concerned, they're not going in with a RTI plan or anything, but they're concerned. A parent always has the right to evaluation, okay? But in CSE, if a child is declassified with an IEP once they are in school, there are two things that can happen. A child can be declassified with a declassification support plan. And that means for up to 1 year, a child may have, maybe they were receiving 2 sessions of speech, 2 sessions of OT, and everyone feels they are at that appropriate level. They no longer qualify under the discrepancy, the deficiency model. We can declassify them and say, but we want them to have 1 session of speech a week, and we want them to have 1 group session of OT a week, just to make sure those skills are still going and that they're maintaining their progress. What that means is within 1 year, the IEP, it's no longer an IEP, it's a declassification support plan, but they're entitled to that service, and they will receive that service to the end date of those services. And then the IEP just naturally falls away. There's no meeting, there's no anything unless there are questions or concerns, and people are concerned that the child is not ready, then we might come back to the committee and look at evaluation. But when a child is declassified with the IEP under CSE, it can either be an outright classification where services stop at that end of the school year, or that given moment when they decide the services are no longer eligible, or they can be on a declassification support plan. There's no other level under special education where that can happen. That is not defined in the regs for early intervention or for CPSE. So that's only under school age programming. CPSE, we have the other tools, as I discussed earlier. We have the response to intervention we can always turn to add some support for a child coming in that is decreasing in services, just to help everyone feel a little bit better as we start phasing in to school age programming. Was that clear? Does anyone have any
Yes, it
questions
was.
on that?
I'd like to address this part to Sherry in terms of looking at progress and continuing some form of service for children. How do you move children as they progress through your programming at Spotted Zebra?
So again, I think both Nancy and Tanya had mentioned looking at the child in different phases. So for the children who are coming in who have a program or who have specific services, we are doing quarterly reports. We're monitoring them. We're ensuring that they are making some progress. As they move through our program, we work with our families to do the annual review, which we're starting to get in the midst of now, which is looking how that child has done over this past school year. Depending on how they're doing, our staff will work with the families to advocate for the appropriate programming that would come up next year. And again, I was one of those parents. When my child lost his services, you should be celebrating. And that's what my chairperson said to me, Sherry, this is a celebratory meeting, not one that you should be mourning the fact. And so I talk to our families, and when children are starting to get a reduction in services because they're doing so well, we talk about how good that is. But we're also watching that child, we're monitoring them, we're being eyes on them, so that if we see them take a step back, then we could be there to support them, whether it's formally or informally. You'll see that in when the child transitions into schools. You know, a lot of families get nervous when their children don't have services going into the formal school system. But again, the school district has eyes, they watch, and they're there to catch that child if they seem to be going backwards. And likewise, if a child is not doing as well, you know, we're an integrated program, but we are a large integrated program. We have 16 to 18 children in each classroom. So our integrated program may not be good for all children, even those who are approved for an integrated program. So if a children starts to regress or not make the progress that we're hoping for, then we will talk about how can we scaffold services? How can we help to support them, whether it's formally or informally? You know, aids, people always talk about one-to-one aids, and I'm not a huge proponent of that. That doesn't always help to have somebody there who is going to be holding their hand to get them through the day. You don't want them to have that dependency. However, if there is a plan in place that will then minimize that kind of support and fade it, then that might be very helpful for that moment while that child is going through whatever transition they're going through. So I hope I've answered that, Tony.
Yes,
I know
that was an excellent point you just made. An excellent point.
Thank you. I know Tanya from my team has a little bit more to add, don't you, Tanya?
Yes, you did. I was just kind of backing up a little bit with what Nancy said. It doesn't fall underneath special education, but at the CSE level especially, there's always consideration of a 504 plan, a section 504 plan,
yeah,
to catch students who are not eligible for or don't have, their needs aren't significant enough for an IEP for special education, but they still need access to testing supports and certain accommodations and modifications, things like that. Section 504 plan is a very good step to kind of ensure that those supports are being administered as they need to be and monitored for their progress using that as well. So just wanted to bring up 504, but and as Sherry had mentioned, agreed 100%. I provide the play therapy with Spotted Zebra, and we've had situations where students have been found they're no longer eligible. They've been declassified. And sometimes part of that scaffolding will look like they may be part of my special peer going into groups, not as me directly doing their goals with them, but they're still getting some play therapy or some support, even though they're not on an IEP document, but they can be a peer partner for other kids. And I definitely, you know, we have seen kids who, I agree with Sherry 100% with the one-on-one justification of, you know, the goal is you're trying to avoid that dependence as much as possible. But sometimes it's necessary for the safety and for the progress of a student to get that level of support. And the goal is, after a short period of time, you know, we've had kids who are really making or have made some progress with that level of support and can kind of come back to a less restrictive need. So, but that progress monitoring, the data collection, all of that goes into show when this child is ready. And it's not just us looking at a child saying, well, I think you're okay, or, you know, it's my opinion. We're data driven in our decision making. So.
Thank you. Especially 504, I forgot all about that. I didn't even.
Well, 504 is a whole nother story.
Yes, it certainly is, and I didn't even think about that. I think I had all of my points I wanted brought up, done. Back to you, Helen.
I see a question in the chat that I think would be a great way to kind of round us out and close up the training for today. Thank you all so much for sharing your time with us and presenting. And if you wouldn't mind putting your email addresses in the chat box, if you're comfortable doing that, that would be really helpful. And I can also share them when I send out the evaluation at the end of today's meeting. So this question says, please explain what is response to intervention? Is it the same throughout the state? What laws govern it? And how does a parent ask about adding this? Also, when do they ask?
Okay. Response to intervention should be the same in New York State, but every school district approaches it differently. So I can't say that there's any one size fits all about response to intervention. It is something in New York State that the state has really pushed districts to adopt. It's been quite a while now. I'd say probably close to 5 to 10 years. And what that is it's looking at, it's having us keep track of every learner and look at them, seeing if they're making the appropriate progress. And if they're not waiting until their progress declines or stops altogether, but looking at what skills do they need to make progress, to move ahead in the grade. And they start doing interventions. What they do is they will have some benchmarks in the classroom in different skills, especially in the earlier grades. You're looking mainly at reading and math and writing. And they'll have benchmarks about what they want a child to be at. If a child's having difficulty with phonetic awareness or being able to name letters and stuff. And then what they'll do is they'll take a baseline of where the child is at. And if they feel a child is below, moderately below other students in the classroom, they will have a response to intervention team. They will set up an intervention, and at anywhere from 6 to 10 weeks, they will provide the intervention at a specified amount of time in a specified way. And then at the end of that time, they will look and see what kind of progress the child has made and whether they still need that intervention. Are they starting to get it? Do we need to intensify that intervention? Are they ready to just benefit from classroom performance, of classroom instruction? And it goes from there. If a child doesn't make the benchmarks, the RTI team will probably refer them to the child study team of that school to talk about why they're not making those benchmarks. Are there any other things that can be done by the classroom teacher or the reading specialist or the math specialist in the building to try to get that child up to where they need to be? So in essence, it's really providing them with individualized services prior to doing any formal classification at all. Typically, a parent can ask about it, but to be honest, your school should be talking to you about it. The classroom teacher, you can always ask the classroom teacher, they should be saying, I've got some concerns. You know, little Debbie is not learning the letter names as quickly as I'd like her to do. I think she could use some extra intervention, and they can sit down and explain that to the parent and talk about what they're going to do. But again, it is something that all schools in New York State are supposed to be doing. It's supposed to be trying to provide response, trying to not let them fail, trying to get them up to where they need to be in an appropriate level, and trying to get to them before an IEP might be needed. But if they continually are having trouble meeting the benchmarks in RTI, the RTI committee may recommend that they have a referral to Committee on Special Education. I don't know if that helps with the answer, but response to intervention is truly a way to get kids services and to try to help kids that may need just a little bit different approach to learning the basic skills in one area or not, so that they may not need any further assistance as they move through the grades. We've done it some school districts. In my school district, we've done it for reading, math, speech, and occupational therapy, and sometimes physical therapy for kids that do not meet the threshold of an IEP, but have some needs. we've set up benchmarks to try to close that gap in those areas.